And there we go. We are live, gentlemen. So welcome to Coffee with Costa, everybody. We're going to wait about 10 minutes or so just to allow some people to come in. I know it takes a few minutes for people to get the bell and let them know that we're live. So let's just chit chat for a bit about nothing, and then we'll get started in about 5 to 10 minutes or so. Cool.
Sure.
If we're just talking about,
let me just double check. Let me just double check how our feed looks like. There we go. I know it takes a few minutes for people. There's a huge lag as well. There's usually a huge lag.
Yeah, no worries.
Between our platform and the actual live on Facebook.
Oh, I see.
So there's about I think it's almost a minute, maybe more.
Okay.
So,
Jason, I actually want your opinion. Did you catch by any chance? Did you catch the UFC last week, or catch kind of the highlights of what happened?
No, I saw a bit of highlights with Robert Drysdale's.
That's exactly what I want to ask you about. What was your take on that? Like, what's your take on that whole situation?
I think, my personal opinion, Drysdale was right to tell him to continue, because as your coach, you often see what the fighter doesn't see, right? Oftentimes, your coach will see you quit in practice when you shouldn't have quit. And because, I'm assuming they have a relationship where he's watched him train, he knows his potential, and he knows the way the UFC is. The UFC can be a one and done, especially since the way that this guy quit. It's going to be very hard for them to bring him back. And Drysdale is a former UFC fighter and a former MMA fighter. He understands the politics of how it looks. It's dangerous, but it's something better to go out on your shield and be stopped than to quit. Because if you get stopped on a 5-day notice fight, they understand that the circumstances probably led to you not being prepared for the fight, but you gave it your best. That's what they want, right? This is an entertainment. Yeah. They want a story. I think that in the midst of the pressure this guy was feeling, he made a call for how he felt. He wasn't thinking about the future. He wasn't thinking about the next round. He was thinking about right now. As a coach, you're supposed to tell people, nah, stop. Listen to me. You can do this. All we need to do, he was giving him very specific, all we need is a takedown.
Yeah.
All we need is a takedown. If you can get the takedown, you're still in this fight. And to me, Drysdale did nothing wrong. In fact, he should be complimented on the fact he believed in his fighter enough to say, you know what? This guy should just go give it one more shot, because we don't know if we're ever going to get back here. For the rest of this guy's life, hopefully not, but this is going to be a defining moment for him as an athlete, right? Because he quit publicly. And unfortunately, it's going to affect his MMA future, because organizations, they're not going to connect with that story of quitting. They're going to connect with the story of going out on your shield, unfortunately. Now, if that was my brother and I'm there in his corner telling me I want to quit, right, I might feel sorry for him. But I think even my brother, I'd be like, nah, bro, no. Just get the takedown. Just get the takedown. That's all. Nothing. Just focus on that. And so my take was that Drysdale did a good job as a coach and as a mentor and as somebody who understands where he's at the time. He gave him the best advice for the time.
Yeah. I strongly believe in what you're saying. And I think that's, again, it's perception is key, right? And I think just the average person watching it doesn't really fully understand the complexities of fighting. This is professional fighting. Yeah. He said he wanted to stop how many times and this and that. He could go out there and get hurt. He could go out there in the first round and get his head blown off his shoulders. Like, it's the fight business, right? It's the fight industry. And what you were saying is 100% correct. Drysdale understands the dynamics of the fight game and what it takes to stay and what the politics are. And he didn't do anything wrong. He was trying to motivate his fighter. And we all know, as fighters and as coaches, I've been in both shoes. I've been a fighter and I've been a coach. You understand that that guy as a fighter, forget what anybody else is saying. As a fighter, he's going to regret that decision.
Yep.
If you're a competitor in your heart and you have aspirations,
Yes,
which I'm sure this young man does, he's going to regret this decision. This is something that is going to eat him up. And he's either going to quit or he'll never be the same. Or if he loses the next fight, he's done. Trust me, I've seen this happen before. Right? He's done. If he loses his next fight, he's done. But he can also come back stronger and use it as motivation, where he's like, man, I can't have that happen again. And it could be motivation, and this kid could be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's got a mountain to climb. The only thing going for him right now, I think, is that I believe the UFC will be pressured by the media and by the fans to have him back. And I think that's good. I think they should give him another chance.
If we're going down to optics, the idea of optics and like what it means as a fighter to like I guess verbally tap out or like actually just to call it what he was saying. I want to bring up two examples here, two very prominent examples in my opinion. Shogun versus Jones, and then George St. Pierre tapping out to Matt Serra. Where they both lost. Both it's not undisputable. These guys are legends, right? If one of them is the greatest of all time. Like, why is that? How do those situations differ? I guess is the question I'm trying to pose. Like, why is it like this one's getting so much more attention versus those two?
If I can give my perspective, in the St. Pierre, I can remember the St. Pierre fight. St. Pierre got hit, rocked, right? And Serra was actually proceeding with more strikes and finishing him. Like, St. Pierre was in the midst of getting hurt, disoriented. Like, it was happening at the time.
Yeah.
Tap out is the way to say, you know what, you got me. Right? So St. Pierre was dropped. He fell down. Serra was doing his job. He was finishing him. He was, swarming him, right? More than likely, that would have been stopped anyway, but St. Pierre tapped. We can respect the tap. The tap is part of our culture, right? I think that the other circumstance, I can't remember what the Shogun fight.
If I'm to kind of put it in like one sentence, it's like he was getting really beat up, and then Jones got him up against the cage, and I think he landed a really nasty body shot after a brutal salvo, and it wasn't going his way, and then Shogun falls to the floor, and you see at the very before the camera pans away, he taps the floor, and Jones kind of calls to himself and walks off.
Those were all tapping to pain in the moment. In the human experience, we can get that. But I think this situation was he's sitting in the corner, right? From what we can see, we don't know. His brains could have been scrambled from strikes or whatever. Or see someone sitting in the corner who was able to talk to their coach. Their coach is telling them information, and they're saying, I don't want to fight anymore. Not, I got rocked, I don't know where I am, I'm disoriented, maybe I took a liver shot, there's pain shooting through my body, I can't respond, right? The impulse is to tap on the ground, right? I think does not take away from any of the three people. I think that what that fighter was feeling, what Drysdale's fighter was feeling, was legitimate. He felt as though he couldn't go on. Yeah. What we're thinking about is long-term, his story. What's the story? Because we're talking about entertainment. Entertainment is led and driven by story, right? St. Pierre's defeat to Matt Serra pushed a narrative and a story that created more of an appeal for St. Pierre. He came back, right? Shogun, he had a storied past before that fight, right? He was a monster in Pride, right? He had some challenges when he came to UFC, but he was a monster in Pride, right? So it continued the Shogun story of how tough he was, how resilient he was. Yes, he's been stopped, right? But look what it took to stop him.
Yeah.
This gentleman's story here is more like, it isn't that you were stopped. You didn't want to fight. It's like a lion that doesn't want to hunt. You got to put that line in.
Quit in the fight business is, I don't care if people's like, oh, why is it like that? Why does it have to be like that? Because it's the fight business. It's such a dangerous environment to be in And you can't have that mentality if you want to be successful inside the cage. You know what I mean? I think here's the thing. I've seen this before. This is a kid who's obviously super talented. This is a kid where, you know, you can hear the stories where in the training area he's beating people up, and we're talking like super high level guys that are in the UFC, and he's just ragdolling them, right?
Yeah.
So again, people see that, they're like, oh wow, the potential. But this is a kid who's had 5 or 6 fights, all first round wins, has never been under real pressure.
Yeah.
Right? Has never been under real, like, oh my God, this sucks.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes that happens. It's not the first time I've seen where a super talented kid runs into that first, like, serious, you know, adversity, and they can't handle it.
Yeah.
They just can't handle it mentally. And you can see that's what happened here.
Oh,
he had a mental breakdown in the corner where he's like, oh shit, this is harder than I thought.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And because he didn't finish the guy in the first round, then he's getting beat up in the second round. He had a mental lapse. But that, again, doesn't diminish his skill or his potential. Right? It was just one moment, one small moment in time where he could potentially now, like, rise up from it and be a superstar if he's as talented as everybody says he is. Or it could be where this is going to ruin his career. And we don't know. And that's why I go back and say, and I strongly believe the UFC should give this kid another shot. You know, and give him a training camp and give him a chance to make weight properly and you know, and have him like 5 days to wrap your head around the fact that you got to get in the cage and fight for UFC is not enough, man. You need that 6-week training camp. You know what I mean? You need that.
Professor,
and that's what. And the other thing, one more thing before we go further, before we kind of put the stop on this topic. The one more thing I'm going to say is that, man, it's the UFC being the kind of like the pinnacle. I think they need to start to be more selective about the fighters, the entry-level fighters they let in. You know, these 5-0. You had 5 professional fights. How are you in the UFC with 5 or 6 professional fights? I think they need to start, like, letting these guys have more fights on the amateur scene, have more fights in the smaller shows, and only start bringing them in after they have 10 or more fights. You know, 10, 15 fights. Okay, and then you go pro. I don't, or you go to the UFC. I don't mean pro. You mean you go to the highest level of the sport. I mean, you bring this guy in, and he fought a veteran. And the funny thing is, like, it wasn't like a guy that was like even in the top 20 that he fought. And because he's a vet and he's rugged and he's tough and he was there to win, he had a full camp. It was all everything was stacked around against this kid, and that one mental lapse just literally, like, made I believe that after a few days of contemplation, he's gonna regret that. And I don't think Drysdale did anything wrong. And you see, if you watch the replay, right at the end, he tells the commissioner guys, like, no, he's done. You hear Drysdale say it. It wasn't like he just tried as much as he could within the 1 minute to try and get his fighter to, because he understood, and we understand as fighters, that you're going to regret this decision, dude. Get out there. You're not hurt. You're physically fine. You're just tired, and it's messing with your head. Right? But you see it. He tries right up until the end, until the guy goes to the corner and asks him or says something, and you hear Drysdale listen to that little snippet that it's gone viral. You hear him say, "Oh, he's done." So it's not like he never agreed. He just pushed it to the limit. And it is what it is. So I think we have a bunch of people viewing us now, and we can actually start moving on with the actual conversation here. So
before we do that, actually, I'm looking at the speed right. I'm looking at your Facebook page right now, and I actually don't see the live video on my second monitor right now.
I'm live. I see it. I have it on my phone.
In that case, never mind. Forget I said anything. Cool.
Yeah. So obviously, whenever we bring a guest on, we need to give them an opportunity to, you know, say a little bit about yourself, who you are, and, you know, what is your relationship with jiu-jitsu and how you got started, and you know, and just then we'll go from there. So please, Professor Jason, a little bit about yourself.
Hello everyone. Thank you for having me on this live. My name is Jason Mcdonald. I am Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Black Belt. I am a first degree under Marcus Soares. My direct professor instructor is Omar Salvosa. I came up, all my belts were under Omar Salvosa. He's my mentor to this day. I currently recently opened up a studio in the Ajax area. Shout out to all the people out in Ajax. My friend Governor, my friend Mahmoud. We got a DNA out in Whitby. We have Professor Bruckman out in Oshawa. We have, if I forget your name, please apologize. But we know we have a lot out here in Durham region. Yeah, I'm out here teaching. I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years, martial arts now for about 20 years. I started off in judo. I was living in Japan as an English exchange teacher. I started training in judo there. That was an eye-opening experience. I got slaughtered for 2 years training with high school and college students. I came back to Toronto, my hometown, and I trained a little bit for about a year. I trained at Minoru Dojo when it was at Dufferin and Queen.
Yep.
I don't know, those who might know, some of the old school judo people might know Sensei Vargas, Sensei Pavlov. Some other part of that dojo was MMA fighter Misha
Serkinov.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a lot younger when I started training there, but he was always a phenom and a beast. I can remember at 15 years old, and he gave everybody hell. But it was a good club. It was a club full of a lot of European judo guys, some Russian guys, some Eastern Bloc guys. So we had a nice, diverse mix of styles of judo. It was a great experience training there. And then I found jiu-jitsu in 2005 with Professor Omar. And yeah, man, like it's been a lovely ride. It's been great. Nothing but good things to say. No bad things. No major injuries. Great community. You know, I came up training and then I progressed to compete a little bit, but primarily people might know me from refereeing a lot. And so, you know, shout out to Tony and all the people involved with the OJA. Like, I've had lots of opportunities to referee over the last 10 to 12 years. And yeah, man, I have nothing but good things to say about the Toronto GTA community. All the OGs out there, to the professors out there, man, it's great. I love it. I have nothing bad to say about jiu-jitsu or the community, so it's been a great experience for me.
Yeah, for sure. I can attest for sure that you are probably one of the most respected referees. I have never seen you have an issue with a call, or, I mean, personally myself, you're a very fair referee and a respected referee, and definitely, I know it's not an easy job. I'm very supportive of referees. I would not do that job myself, but I respect referees, and for me, I always give the guys a little bit of a slack. You're human. You'll make mistakes, and that's what I tell my students. You'll never see one of my students behave badly towards a referee. Never. I tell them, listen, if it didn't go your way, you didn't do your job. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. And yes, referees make mistakes. It happens. You're human, you know, and you just gotta suck it up and move on. You know what I mean? It's not the world championships. It's the local tournament. If the referee made a mistake, hey, it happens, man. Suck it up. Sign up for the next tournament. Prepare better. You know, it's cliche with the UFC and the whole, like, don't leave it in the hands of the judges. It's the same thing in jiu-jitsu. Like, if you do your job as an athlete and you compete to the best of your abilities, you will win. Right? Make it easy on the refs to do their job. You know, if you leave room for error, then, you know, go your way. But you shake their hand, you bow out, and try again. I will not accept bad behavior from athletes towards referees.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I want to touch on something we were talking about backstage, actually. Judo in Japan and the culture of judo there. Could you expand on that?
Intense, man. Intense. It's I mean, it's an Olympic sport, so already that comes with a certain level of reputation. I was there in Japan in 99 to 2001. And so one of my favorite judoka was Kosu Inoue, world champ, multiple times.
Yes.
And gold medalist, beautiful judo. He represents the experience I had. Like a lot of the students that I trained with, very stoic, very focused, beautiful technique. Listen, I mean, I was being thrown by girls, by high school girls, man. Like the ones that
ain't nothing wrong with that.
What I can say is, when I compare the style of training here compared to my time in Japan, is speed. Speed was a noticeable thing. All of their techniques were done so quickly. Oftentimes, I mean, I was very athletic in my younger years, and so I was strong. I've never been a weak person, and I would try to manhandle people. And the footwork and speed that they would use to toss me, I'm talking about girls. We're not even going to talk about the guys. The footwork and speed they would use to throw me would be awesome. Just for
some context, like you're making a size discrepancy here. Like you're making it like how, if you didn't mind me asking, how much did you weigh back then, and like what were the size of your opponents?
Okay, so I'm let's say 6 foot. Right now I'm 240 pounds. At the time I was trained there, I was 6 foot 180, but I was a ferocious 180. I was like, I was in great shape.
Yeah.
And also too, because I knew I was a foreigner, I was trying even harder. Like, you know what I mean? Because I was like, everybody wanted to fight me, not in a negative way, but in a way of like, I'm like, I've never met someone who looks like me before. So
they have to test, man.
They have to test. And the instructors would say, go train with him, go train with him. And it was a great experience. Compared to here, judo is not as popular here in Ontario, North America, as it is there. It's not in the school system here. There, every school has a judo team. By the time kids are in their first year of high school, they're typically black belts. By the time they leave high school, typically they would be a second degree or knee dan, right? And typically you have people who compete in college and train in college. They're at the knee dan, san dan, or third degree, second, third, fourth degree, right? That's what, in the college time, that's what they're developing, right? And so you have the base level is very high. But also, a black belt doesn't mean anything as a first degree black belt. It doesn't mean anything like the way it does here, right? Because we make a myth about black belts here that they don't have there, right? And so
it's kind of just a standard.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, it's the standard, right? If you want to join the high school judo team, you should be a black belt. And that you have now a bigger pool of people to choose from. And the discrepancy between black belts is so vast. Like there's black belts and then there's really good black. It's a lot like here. If you think about blue belts, there's blue belts, and then there's world champion blue belts, and then there's black belts, and then there's world champion black belts. Right? We all have the same color belt on, but there's definitely a discrepancy in ability and skill and size and power and all that stuff. Right?
We spoke about this like thoroughly on our last show about belt promotions and the difference in skill and ability, and that doesn't diminish people's credentials, or it's just the way it goes when you have elite level athletes versus your casual practitioner, right? You can't expect the casual practitioner, even though they might be black belts, to keep up with an elite level athlete who's also a black belt, or even elite level lower belts. You can't keep up with these kids, even though you might be at the rank of black belt. And we spoke about that in our last episode and we went to a lot of different levels on that as well. And just to go back a little bit to what you were saying about judo in Japan, obviously it's the birthplace of judo, so you can expect the expectations to be high all across the board. And I think it's amazing that they have judo in the schools. If we could get jiu-jitsu in the schools here, it would be amazing. I think the community as a whole would be different. And Japanese culture, you can see Japanese.
Oh, did we lose Professor Marco just for a sec?
Yeah, I think we lost him for a second.
Wait for it. Oh, is he back?
Am I back?
He's back.
All right. So that again, one thing I don't like about Canada in particular, and I love this country. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm very, very happy and fortunate. I am a proud Canadian citizen, but the way they handled professional sports is terrible. It's terrible. I don't think there's enough funding and money and support to elite level athletes across all sports, but especially like judo and wrestling. Like, there's no funding there, barely no money given to athletes. If you get accarded, which means like you're part of the Olympic team, and if you find out what they're being given to live on as an athlete and train and do, it's a joke. It's a joke. When you go to like Russia and Japan and everything is fully funded, the US, everything fully funded. You're spending before the Worlds or before the Olympics, you're spending 3 or 4 months at the Olympic Training Center. It's just not the same. And our Canadians, we've had a lot of talented Canadians that have won world championships and medaled at the Olympics. But if you look at their stories and what they had to go through, like they're the ones who had the means to travel just to train because they can't get the high level training here. Right. So they got to go to Europe. They got to go to Japan. They got to go to where the best players are playing and just to practice, just to do camps.
That's
right? So I think that's extremely disappointing. And I wish Canada would treat their athletes way better than what they do right now, financially.
Yeah, I agree. We have the money. We have it. So
just don't want to spend.
In terms of Jason, you started jiu-jitsu in 2005 after like a long decorated history of judo in Japan, right?
Not decorated.
Oh, sorry. Experience. Veteran.
Let's be clear.
Remember what I said about being thrown around by girls I outweighed 60 pounds? Okay, not that
experience. Okay, fair enough. Right.
Okay, hang on. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Did you get a chance to do any competitions in judo there?
Yes. Two local.
Oh, good.
Two local tournaments.
It's basically national. It's decorated.
One thing about martial arts I learned is the mats don't lie. Okay.
Yeah.
Mats don't lie.
You gotta be humble, man.
You gotta be humble. You know what? I gave it a go. I am not the best in this room, but I'm gonna keep training. So, yeah.
Love it. Yeah. All right, I gotta ask though. Yeah. How do those competitions go?
1-1, lost.
Okay.
Both ones. I won the first match, lost the second match.
Judo is not my it's not my cup of tea, but it's like you win by ippon or points, I would imagine, right?
I won mine by points.
Oh.
I lost mine by ippon.
Fair enough. Okay, that's unreal.
I mentioned before the speed. That is the one. There was no time when I was training in Japan, right, where I ever felt roughed up. Do you know what I mean? Like nobody ever roughed me up. Even when we're doing newas, I never got I feel like, oh, I'm crushed up. Man, everything was just done so quickly. I often didn't even know what was happening until my feet were in the air. Aerial, then I'm like, oh, this is over. You know what I mean? So that's it's the speed at which they did things.
Speed and timing.
That's it, man.
Speed and timing.
Yep.
Speed and timing. That's what judo's all about, man.
Yes.
Timing and fast. Yep. Commitment. You find the timing, you got the footwork, full commitment, full commitment. And I think that's something that people have to understand when it comes to learning throws, because I was fortunate enough to do a little bit of judo. I'm not claiming to be anything, you know, big, but I'm a studious guy, and you know, and I study a lot, and I try to learn as much as I can. And I was fortunate enough to practice with some decent people as well. When it comes to judo, I just never got the ranks because we were training judo within the BJJ context, you know, in the BJJ academy, right? So, and that's just takedowns in general, even wrestling, right? And I say this to my students all the time: you practice, you know, footwork, timing, entries, but you can't second guess ever in takedowns.
No.
Full 100% commitment. Once you decide to go, you got to go hard. You got to go as fast as you can. You know, so you practice the timing, you practice the footwork, you practice the grips, but then it's full commitment. And then in the sense, it's speed. You got to go fast.
Yeah.
Right. If you go too slow, or you miss the moment, or you don't have the confidence, boom, you lose the opportunity. And it's not the same as on the ground where you can methodically set things up.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
You know, step by step, grip by grip. No, there's a grip fight, and there's an opening, and if you see the opening, you have to go. So I see what you're saying. I totally understand what you're saying with the speed. And you see that. You see that when you watch wrestling matches. You see that when you watch judo. It's like when you see the perfect throw, you can understand it. You understand that idea of the speed factor. Right? But I think there's also that commitment factor too.
Yeah, 100%.
I've been reading a lot of stuff on Dave Camarillo recently, and how he talked about his transition from judo to the jiu-jitsu, and how it's like it's a faster pace. I've never done judo myself, but in terms of like when you how was your transition from judo to jiu-jitsu? Was it a similar kind of feeling? Like you felt that jiu-jitsu was a little slower, or did things just come more naturally? How does that transition?
The transition was not difficult at the lower ranks.
Oh,
white and blue, right? Because in judo you do newaza, so I understood basic positioning. Like I knew how to pin people, so I knew how to do side control. I knew how to do mount. I know how to do back position, back control. I knew half guard wasn't really a thing that I trained when I was doing newaza, but the guard game was different. I knew close guard. I knew how to do an arm lock from close guard, those things. And so the intensity at which we train in judo, right? I've never done anything like that with that level of intensity because of what Professor was saying, the commitment level. When you go for an arm bar in judo, you're trying to break the arm. You don't even want the tap. You want the arm broken. Because as a competitor, you don't want to face that person again in that tournament. So if you choke them unconscious, break their arm, right, you will not face them again, possibly in repechage if you lose. And so the idea is kill or be killed. That just like in wrestling and boxing, it creates that kind of I will kill everyone mentality. You see that in the competitive areas of jiu-jitsu, right? But in the recreational areas, right, it's a bit of a play. It's a bit of a more relaxed. So like I remember doing camps in judo. We do like seasonal camps, like spring training, summer training, and we'd be doing a 3-day camp, and we do judo from 9 a.m. to 12, lunch break, 1 to 4. And we would just be throwing each other all day. An hour of newaza, so an hour of groundwork, and then right to throwing. They line us all up. They tie a white belt around us. 10 people stand up. It's shark bait, right? Shark Tank. And every 2 to 3 minutes, you're getting a new partner. And you have to do 10 rounds. You have to do 10 rounds, right? Nobody's quitting. I remember literally kneeling on the ground in a puddle of sweat. And people walking up to me saying, like they're ready to go. They saw me literally weak, and they're like, no, we got to fight. And so that level of intensity, you leave training and your hands are shaking, right? Like, because of muscle fatigue, that's the level, and this is a high school level, right? This is the level of training that they were doing for that. Coming here, the only time you get that intensity is if you're training with competitors, right? That level of intensity I have not experienced in jiu-jitsu as yet, right? But the roughness, like people going for submission, that's in jiu-jitsu, right? But that intensity, because everything means something. Every position, every grip means something in judo, right? No one is letting you willingly put their hands on you, right? The grip breaking can break your fingers. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Right.
Yeah.
We're blood on gis on the collars. That's normal, like from grip fighting and ripping and shredding, right? That's the entry. That's not even the throw. Right? And so that's the level of intensity of training for judo. And I've been told wrestling is the same kind of intensity.
Yep.
I've seen that in jiu-jitsu, but only amongst really serious guys. Like you can't do 4 hours a day. You can't do 4 hours a day of judo every day. You have to cycle that. Right? You're not doing 4 hours of randonnée every day. Your body will.
Jason, brother.
Yeah.
You came in a little late.
Oh, sorry.
Coming in 2000. You're coming in 2005.
Yeah.
You came in a little late. Because if you came in 99, between 99 and 2005, you would have come into more of an MMA space.
Yes. Yes.
Right. It was less of like a sports jiu-jitsu space. It was more of an MMA space. And I think you would have had a different experience with with those environments, because man, those were hard times, but enjoyable times for me, because I enjoyed that kind of an environment. But it was that kill or be killed, and a lot of people quit, and a lot of people couldn't handle it because it was rough, and and jiu-jitsu was way more aggressive and going for heel hooks and things like that, even back then. So you came in literally when the sport had its first kind of like boom, right? As a sport, a gi sport.
Yeah.
And, and again, I agree with you that jiu-jitsu is a more laid back, more chill environment when you're just training with, and you're just training for fun. But I do try to create, I understand elite level competition, and as a coach, of elite level athletes, you need to understand what that means. So if you come to some of my competition classes, and you see what I put these guys through, and I think Michael's experienced a couple of those. They are not fun, man. They're not fun times. They're hard. They're very hard. And I understand that. And that's what I'm trying to instill in my athletes. Like, guys, when you go against the best in the world, it's a different game.
Oh yeah.
It's a whole different level. Yeah. So you need to prepare as such. You need to have not only a good physical training, but mental training. And a lot of the times, the only way you're going to build that mental training is, a lot of people say, oh, you can see sports psychologists and all that. Yes, I'm not downplaying on that. I think that's valuable if you really need that. But the mental game is also built by putting yourself through those.
Oh yeah.
Those types of training.
You got to suffer.
you got to suffer, man. You got to suffer a lot, because when you're in a match and it's close and this guy's all over you, you can't break. You can't mentally break. You got to have grit, and you got to have a certain attitude, and you're right about this. Like, I try to tell him, it is kill or be killed. Yeah, it's got to be kill or be killed, right?
Michael, I got an opportunity to do some amateur boxing on a very recreational light level.
Oh yeah.
And I started boxing when I was in my 30s. So I trained at Dwight's boxing club out in Mississauga. Great coach, has a lot of good boxers. Man, that kill mentality, you see the difference between people like myself, recreational, let me I'll do some sparring, la la la, and people who are training for nationals. And man, I got in the ring with some people who are like national level guys, and I stopped.
Yeah.
Because I was like, nah, I don't need to be hitting the head like that unless I'm trying to do something with this. This is not a I need my brain cells for jiu-jitsu, right? Like there's a difference between the killer be killed mentality and I'm doing this for fun, maybe for self-defense, to stay in shape, right? And it doesn't seem like a lot until you get in the ring or you roll with somebody who is trying to kill you. Right?
Yeah.
Right. That's when you understand, like, oh, these fingerprints he left on my skin, like the fingerprints left on my skin because he's trying to pull my gi. That's killer be killed, right? And oh, he put me in a chokehold and I tapped before he even finished it because his grip on my neck was so tight. Like they're different animals. That's why, like Professor saying, you don't put your competitors in with your recreational people if it's time for competition, because you don't put kittens in with lions and expect everybody to get along.
It's I'm not gonna lie. It's like if I'm trying to turn it up in certain situations, and then like you're with certain people that are doing this on recreational level, it's not fair for me in the sense that I can't go full tilt. And for them, why is it why like what you trying to hurt me, trying to kill me? It's like, well, not gonna lie, a little, but at the same time, it's not personal. It's just for
No, that's the thing that has to be distinguished. And of course, that's established by whoever's in charge. And that's the professor who needs to instill that culture of, hey, guys. And I say that to my guys, listen, you do not give an inch. When you're in a competition class, you do not give an inch. You are trying to enforce your will. And you cannot take, as the other person, as the one on the receiving end, you cannot take it personal. They are doing their job. Your job is to try and improve so you can push back. So you cannot take it personal that, like, man, if I took every ass whooping I took from Monkey, Bruckman, Antonio, Sean Pearson, and all the other guys that was back in the dungeon, if I took all of that personal, I would have stopped training.
Yeah, no, 100%.
I didn't take it personal. I love those guys. I love those guys. I didn't take it personal. What I did was always damn, how did he do this to me? And how did he do that? And how do I fix me? It was never an animosity thing or a jealous thing. It was always like, how do I improve me? I want to push back, right? I want to get better. I want to push back. I want to put them in their place. But I never crossed my mind about disliking an individual because they were, beating me up. That it was never personal for me. It's just competition. It's just competition. And I try to instill in my athletes, like, guys, don't take it personal.
No.
You cannot. If the same guy day in and day out is kicking your butt, they're doing their job. You cannot take it personal. You either improve, or maybe it's just this person's always going to have your number. You're going to have to accept that.
Speaking of on top of the competition, you referee a fair number of competitions for jiu-jitsu. Yeah. How did that? When did that development begin after you got to jiu-jitsu?
Shout out to my professor, Professor Omar Salvosa. Shout out to Tony.
Yes.
Shout out to all of the OJA, Fernando, all the people who. I started doing it when Omar started having his tournaments back in the day, and more opportunities came as OJA. Shout out to all the OGs back then, Professor Bruckman, yourself, Professor Costa. You guys started really organizing our community into really legit, viable, worth something tournaments that had a schedule and you could set your year to it and goal set, right? To me, we were speaking about this earlier. You guys really built a community, and that's not taking away from anyone I didn't mention, because it's all the coaches, all the teams, even some of the teams that are like the Japanese jiu-jitsu and stuff. Like, you guys created an environment where we could really test our mettle as competitors and then as referees, right? Because as the competition got better, right, we were exposed to more international level referees. The trainings got better. The trainings got very focused and very regimented and very regular, right? And so that experience helped my jiu-jitsu on a personal level, right? That experience helped me as I was talking to some of my training partners and peers that I trained with, right? I'd always remind them of, if you're competing, you have to think a certain way. And I would remind them, like, you're doing things not just for doing its sake, but you have to show the referee something. As a referee, I'm standing and watching a match. The difference between an advantage or a stall call is really my perception of what the person is doing, right? And so that starts from the first grip. That starts from the look on your face. That starts from the intentional way you're going about doing things, right? It doesn't look like stalling if you're intentionally looking like you're moving to do something, right?
Yeah.
And someone who's training, I understand that. And then I articulate to my training partners and the people who would ask me for advice, and I articulate to parents, and that increases the knowledge across the board, right? It increases the knowledge of the community, and it makes the community feel like this is a worthwhile experience to bring my kids to a tournament, to sit in the stands and to watch this. Like I can't say enough about how we as a community have really built this thing from the mud, right? Like,
yeah,
everybody's contributed. Yeah. It's really like, you got to remember, there's people that are coming to our tournaments from Michigan, from New York State, places as far as Rochester and Syracuse. There's people who would drive across the border to come to our local tournaments because of how well they're run, the community that supports it, the refereeing, the coaching. Man, we all get heated, obviously, when we want to win and stuff, but we've never had anything ridiculous happen at the tournaments, right? And even as a referee, people have said, like, ref, you don't know what you're doing. But those same people have come to me after and be like, listen, man, you know what, Jason? I got a little heated. It was my student, Like, I've never felt like, oh, like, I suck. No, I feel like I've made a mistake. Tony, Fernando, Professor Marco, Professor George, they'll come to me like, nah, that wasn't. They'll tell me after, right? But they're not going to embarrass me while I'm on the mat because they have an understanding.
Absolutely.
If you make the referees look bad, the tournament looks bad, right? Because like I said, this community has been built from the mud, right? Our community reaches all the way out to Niagara Falls, man, like to Windsor, to like Quebec. People from Quebec come to our tournaments, right? Because I think they recognize, and it's not taken away from Quebec's scene. Quebec is an awesome scene too, but they recognize in Ontario, we take this jiu-jitsu thing serious, whether it's competitive, whether it's training. Like, this community was built by people who care about the art and who care about seeing it go into something. There are kids right now who are black belts who were directionless before they met jiu-jitsu, but they met the right instructor, and now their parents can attest to the fact that this gave them focus, right? And so this community really, like, man, I have nothing but good things to say about it.
Yeah. I think that sometimes what happens with new generations, if they don't take the time or the effort to look at what happened in the past and how things happen, or some of ourselves, or the OGs as we are called, if we don't speak our minds about, certain things, then it's not clear. Or it's, you don't understand how lucky you have it, how fortunate the BJJ community is right now. Because when we started, it was chaos, man. Chaos. We had to register the day of. We had to weigh in the day of. Sometimes the brackets weren't set up until the day of. We had sometimes tournaments go out until like 10 o'clock at night. Because it was so unorganized. It was crazy. It was just, and it was like two divisions, beginner and advanced, and everything was allowed. Everything wasn't allowed in the advanced. Everything, slamming, heel hooks, scissor takedowns, everything was allowed.
Spinal locks, like all that, like doesn't matter.
Everything, everything was allowed. Right. So yeah, but the funny thing is that even though that was the case, I don't recall of too many like big injuries though.
More injuries.
We also, I think, a lot of us knew to tap fast too. because we knew like you don't tap, you get hurt.
Yeah.
So I think it was different. It was a different environment. And it was a time I can't listen. Don't ask me to recall the dates. I'm not very good with dates. Okay, but there was a time where the OJA got solidified with some right people, and then the truth is, I'm going to be honest and give credit where credit is due, and I will always do that. Gringo did a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
He's the one that really started with this pre-registration software where you can register ahead of time and you can have the brackets way ahead of time and all this other stuff. Him, Tony Isaacs, and a few other members of the community really started to get more and more organized in the organization of running tournaments. And it's only progressively getting better every year. Every year it gets better and better, more and more professional, to the point where Gringo runs the Ontario Open, which is almost 1,300 competitors I think he had last year.
Yeah.
Right? So it's getting better. The software is getting better. The referee quality is getting better. Like you were saying, more training, more frequent training. And of course, the modern times have facilitated a lot of things. The internet was a big thing, right? In our day, it was just starting. It wasn't really much to it. That has changed a lot of like the education process of everything, from technique to referees to you know, all of that. And we're like in pros and cons, right? Like you can look at our era as like the golden era because of so many things. But organization-wise, talent, skill, and evolution, you look at today, and it's like night and day, night and day.
And it's not taken away from anyone that's not mentioned. Like, I mean, my Professor Omar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. Yeah, but he's the one with, I believe, is probably the longest running tournament. Maybe him and Bravado and the GTA Classic. Yeah. I think they're the two longest running tournaments. Yeah. Right? And I have nothing but love for Professor Salvosa. We are good friends. We have a good relationship. I admire him greatly. He's a fantastic professor. I think we have similar personalities as well. And the way he does this, how he handles his business and how I handle mine is very similar. And he's a great person. And man, I know he doesn't get spoken enough about, but he's a beast, like absolute monster. And he's very successful. And for someone that probably doesn't weigh more than 145 pounds, you know, 150 pounds, man, he's a world champion. Like, he's a beast, absolute beast.
His beast-like skills. And he does everything.
Yeah, man, he's like what? Twice his size, right?
Yeah, easy.
Right, easy. And
I weigh about at least 100 pounds. And when we roll, I get a lot out of it. Right? Believe me. Believe me. He does everything.
No, I remember.
Professor Omar will be smiling the entire roll. Right? So.
Yeah. I think it just comes. It's a testament to BJJ, to Jiu-Jitsu, because it was the same. I can say the same for Monkey, right? Like back in the day, Professor Monkey didn't weigh more than 138 pounds. Yeah. Right? Yeah. He was skin and bones. Yeah. But man, he's always been very talented, always. Yeah. And I don't know if you had the pleasure of rolling with him, but.
Remember we said,
you know, he's
kill or be killed? That's
man.
You're rolling with him. You knew if you left anything out, if you left your baby finger out there and he caught that baby finger,
done.
It's gone. It's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
So.
He's a very skilled individual, but if it's this, what I'm getting at is the two of them. You look at them; they're small individuals in stature, and well, maybe not in stature, but it's like in weight.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think Monkey's ever weighed more than 155. You know, that's not big. He's not a big person. But I've seen him toy with guys twice his size, 3 times his size. So it's very, that's how, like, I can relate with Monkey as an example, and I could see how you would have this similar experiences with Professor Omar.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's just pure skill.
Yeah,
it's just pure skill, right?
Another thing I love about it too is, I mean, you know, I'm talking about my love affair with the GTA scene, but man, I love the way, at least publicly, all instructors really give people their due. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have different schools. Obviously, everybody has their school. Everybody has it's like a school rivalry. Oftentimes in tournaments, everybody wants to be, you know, the best team. We want our students to win. But I can tell you that overall, like, I mean, nobody is. I've never seen. It's not like the Karate Kid movie where the instructor is telling the kid to do something. You know, no one's to like go for the heel. I hate this kid. You know what I mean? Like, you have to really look at what jiu-jitsu, and I mean, if you compare us to our sister sport, which is judo, right? That's the only, you can't compare us to wrestling and stuff. If you compare us to our sister sport, which is judo, which is an Olympic sport, and Canada has a history in judo, right? If you compare what the jiu-jitsu community has done, our tournaments rival and often sometimes surpass judo tournaments. And judo has a longer history.
Oh, by far. Now, by far. The judo it's taken a massive hit.
Yeah. And we've built this from nothing, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, Professor, when you started training, where were you training? Were you training in like storage spaces? Were you training in like old karate studios that let you guys rent space to, you know what I mean? Like, you probably had very basic amenities when you were training, right?
Well, when I started, because there was no BJJ in Canada, it was right after UFC 1. So I was actually just training at my Taekwondo place, because that's what I was training at the time, Taekwondo and Muay Thai. And we just literally started rolling around on carpets, like carpet floor and hardwood floor sometimes, until we got some puzzle mats and started playing with that. It wasn't until from 1993 to 1997, it was just whatever we could find. Again, I was lucky enough to find a judo club at the community center near where I lived, and judo was free. And it was, I believe it was 3 times a week, and I started training there.
Yeah.
It was a short time, and I had about 3 or 4 tournaments that I did. I like yellow belt, orange belt, and then 97 was when I transitioned to BJJ, because it was nothing against judo. I love judo. It was that I had this, you know, I had this vision after watching Royce Gracie in UFC 1 that like I wanted to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So my dream wasn't to be a judo black belt; it was to be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So as soon as that opportunity came to get into BJJ, that's what I followed. That's what I went to. It wasn't just BJJ like as a sport. I wanted to fight in a cage. I wanted to be an MMA fighter. So that's the path I followed. So I didn't give up on judo because I didn't like it. It was just not what I wanted. That wasn't my dream. But I've always had admiration and respect, and I continue to train judo, just not officially.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had to. Those first few years was interesting. I was competing at tournaments, like they were jiu-jitsu tournaments. I think started in 94, 95 with CGA, like the Canadian Jiu-Jitsu Association. They had a few tournaments back then. And I was competing in tournaments with like little to no experience, you know. And I guess I had a knack for it because I started to do fairly well. And then when I actually started training in a formal type of grappling with judo, it helped me even more. And then of course I'm going to officially into BJJ, and then you go from there. But yeah, it was interesting times, man. It's totally different than what it is today.
Yeah.
So relative to you guys, your respective humble beginnings and coming up in Toronto, I'm curious, Jason, like, when did you take the decision to make your own gym? Like, I'm seeing elemental jiu-jitsu is thing. When did you decide to make that jump?
Through lots of encouragement from Professor Omar, lots of self-talk. I decided, like, I'm 43 right now, so I've kind of put aside that desire to be like the baddest man on the mats, kind of, like I want to tap everybody on stuff. I wanted to really pour into another set of kids that will be coming up learning martial arts because, as a person of color, as a racialized person, I see the value of adding martial arts to your life experience because it gives you certain intangible traits and skills that transfer your life overall, right? That's what I've gotten from it. And having lived in another culture, right? Part of my ability to be in a foreign land and thrive was martial arts and the things it taught me and the internal and mental lessons it taught me. So when I started my club, that was my intention, right? Was to share my experience with the next sort of generation of kids coming up and even people who are just interested, right? To share that experience because I think that martial arts brings value to your life. In a world where you can talk to your computer and they can find you anything you want. You can go on any website you want and get all the information you want. You can go and watch YouTube videos for thousands of hours on jiu-jitsu. Man, go on the mats. Everything you watch is not going to work the way it worked on the video. Do you know what I mean?
Gotta live it.
Those are intangible things that kids need to recognize and learn, right? These are skills that I'm trying to give to these kids that even if they stop doing jiu-jitsu, they will learn how to negotiate better. They will learn how to stand up to people better. They will learn how to make better life choices because of the patience they've been taught from jiu-jitsu, right? So I made that decision in 2018 to open up this particular spot. My wife and I, she's an entrepreneur. I have a day job, but she's an entrepreneur. And she was looking for this spot. And so I piggybacked on her. So we're actually in a joint spot. So her store is in the front, my studio is in the back.
Oh, beautiful setup.
Yeah, it worked
Smart.
out really. Yeah, I think I'm gonna keep her. She's a good wife.
I think this is now
support their men and their Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu dreams.
Oh, for sure. I'm on the same boat. Yeah, man. I would not be here where I am doing what I'm doing, following my dream if it wasn't the support of my wife. She's incredible. So absolutely agree with that. I think now this is kind of like a good time to move on to a very serious topic that was, the one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on here. And I think the community, the BJJ community, I think needs to address some of these concerns and some of these things that are coming up. Maybe as a community, I'm not sure, but I think this is a good start. Is just getting the people that are involved in the community and in the forefront, the leaders, to maybe have these serious conversations and to add in a positive way to maybe even contributing to a solution of some sort. So Professor Mcdonald, Professor Jason, speak a little bit about what's your experience been like with what's going on to our neighbors down in the South and all the what happened, the incident that happened and the aftermath and what is, what's occurring afterwards.
Okay.
Just kind of guide us through, how you feel and your views, and then maybe we can start speaking about maybe some solutions and some and what are the problems, not just like singular problems, but other areas that are problematic. And I will hopefully speak my opinion as well, and how we can start going towards, finding solutions.
Okay. So, based on my humble worldview, and, obviously I'm looking at it as Jason Mcdonald, right? I can tell you, as a person of African descent growing up in North America, right? I'm Afro-Caribbean, so I'm famous from Trinidad and Tobago. Growing up here in Canada, right? It's a different experience growing up here in the GTA than it is growing up in an urban center in the U.S., right? And so, as a child of first generation immigrants, my experience is different than theirs. But some of the interactions of racial bias and some of the systematic racism that they experience, it's experienced here by people that look like me and people who are not part of the dominant culture. Right? And so when I watch the events the last couple of months, right, what I see is overall the picture is there's people that live in the U.S. who are citizens. They have been promised something from the government, which is equal treatment under the law. They've been promised equal access to different resources. They've been promised the right to pursue life and happiness. These are things that are part of the American mindset and American ethos. And those promises have not been fulfilled for those people. In fact, what we're seeing is the same state that's supposed to be helping them or providing those opportunities has actually used its power against them, right? And it's played out into specific events. So right now we're talking and we're speaking about the incidents with George Floyd, another incident that happened prior to that with Ahmaud, I forget his name, the last name at the end, it's on the tip of my tongue right now, but in Atlanta, and then other instances of police brutality. When I use the word police brutality, I want to preface it by saying this. We're not talking about an officer arresting somebody and they bump their head against the door as they go into the car, right? A lot of what we're seeing is documented video documentation of the people who are agents of the state not really following their training and direction, arresting people and detaining them, and then using unnecessary force to either get the arrest or to maintain control, and that force leads to death. That's primarily what the uproar and the backlash is about. The people are dying in the custody of the state. Now, whether you want to say it's a white officer, a black officer, an Asian, it doesn't matter, because we see in a lot of these circumstances, the color of the officer, it changes. It's not always a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed officer. Sometimes it's a biracial officer. Sometimes it's a black officer. Sometimes it's Indo-Asian or Asian officer, right? I'm not focusing so much on the color of the officer. What I'm seeing is the state is not doing a good job of providing these people that it's being taken into its custody with safety. We don't know if these people even committed a crime. They're dead. So we'll never know what really happened for the police to be called or the police to be involved. Policing is a hard job, period. Police officers have levels of stress that none of us experience, period. Police officers get into policing overall to help their community, period. I'm not even arguing that. Like, I'm not even saying, I'm giving that right away. That's given.
Yeah.
What we have is, when you as an agent of the state, that's what police officers represent. When the state gives you power to do certain things, the state arms you and says you now have the right to enforce state laws and what the state wants to do. If you abuse that, we, as the public, have a right to hold you accountable.
Absolutely.
What you did was wrong. Someone has to pay for that. And so what we're seeing is the state people, they're saying that we want to hold these people accountable. Now, whether you're involved with Black Lives Matter, any anti-government organization, Antifa, anarchists, all that stuff, to me, they're all going to jump in and protest together, right? Because they have a common goal of protesting the state. But at the heart of this is about people dying in the custody of police. Now, it has to be. Sorry.
No, I think I've had multiple conversations with several people over the last couple of weeks about this. And again, I like to have one-on-one conversations so it's clear, and we are, I think the understanding has to be that we all want what's best.
Yeah.
But there's so many layers.
Yes.
So many layers to all of this that is not so simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's not such a simple, like, you know, black versus white
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
You can simplify it to that point, but I don't see it like that. I think there's so many layers that goes into this, and to me, there's three problematic areas.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want your opinion on how I see this.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, what we want to get rid of is, okay, we want to get rid of the stigmas,
Mm-hmm.
right? We need to get rid of the stigma of the criminal black man, and we need to get rid of the stigma of the corrupt cop or the racist cop, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not all officers are bad, and not all black people are criminals.
Mm-hmm.
These are the big stigmas.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's one layer. But then you have other layers, I think, that are affecting the overall society's mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, these are the three things that I see that are problematic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Low income housing, where you have this situation where you bring crime, violence, drugs, you know, and all these problems, and that's a problem. But the thing is, that's not a color issue, though,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that there are plenty of communities that are low income housing, that
Mm-hmm.
have crime, that have drugs,
Mm-hmm.
that are other ethnicities.
Yes.
That brings me to my second problematic area,
Mm-hmm.
the media,
Yeah.
right? The media is a problem because it only focuses, because it knows that's what it sells, that's what gets people riled up, that's what gets people like agitated, is they only focus on one group.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that pushes the stigma even more.
Mm-hmm.
So the media is a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not doing its job, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not a fair coverage
Mm-hmm.
of the society as a whole and the
Mm-hmm.
problems that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because there are, you know, other ethnic background, social economic, you know, ghettos
Mm-hmm.
that have crime and violence and people die every day, but doesn't get coverage.
Yes.
Right? So again, the media is a big problem here. And the third issue is obviously that we've been talking about this for a while, is the undertraining of police officers.
Okay.
They are not training enough.
Mm-hmm.
For example, they need to train de-escalation tactics every week. They need to train jiu-jitsu every week. They need to have psycho assessments once or twice a month, a year. Sorry. So none of this is being done.
Mm-hmm.
So these are undertrained individuals. There's also problems, I think, within the environment where, okay, you have these senior police officers and they influence the attitude of the newer. So it gets passed on, the stigma and the issues gets passed on from generation of police officer to the next generation of police officer, and there's nothing being done about that either. Right? Because again, training. So these are the kind of, like, I look at it as the roots of today's problems, because we all know this goes much further back, you know, and there's, again, layers upon layers upon layers, and it's not a simple answer, black and white answer. You know what I mean? It's much deeper than that. But when I'm looking at it, I'm trying to be logical about it. These are the three areas that I see that we need to find solutions for. Okay, how do we get rid of, not get rid of, but like improve on the areas where you have drugs and crime? How do we make the media accountable for the bullshit? And how do we improve the police department or the police departments?
May I respond?
Am I on the right track here,
I would
Jason?
say you're hitting three areas that are definite problems. And I'm trying to think of a way to add to what you're saying. So in addressing the first area that first thing that you noticed and that you're logical kind of approach to it, and I agree with it. Yes, there are other areas other communities, other high priority, high crime, social disparities, issues and challenges in other communities, right? And so that's true, but they don't get the same press. And you're pointing out to the media, shining a light only on certain communities, right? Because they know that it's gonna get people hyped. It's gonna get people agitated, right? And then you finally mentioned policing and the training that's offered to police officers. So I see you making excellent, valid points in all those. Can I add something?
Absolutely, sir.
Um,
I mean, that's why I brought you on here in the first place, because
definitely.
I want you to educate me better and to make me understand better.
I'll probably do a terrible job at both those things, but you've already concisely pointed out some of the areas that you see as challenges, and I agree with you in those areas. This is where I think this becomes a challenge because, you said, it's multi-layered. I think if we take racism away from those three things that you've pointed out, we're doing a disservice to how complex those things you mentioned are. Because with those things you mentioned, the complexity of racism, and when I say racism, I mean the biases that are internal in all of us living, as people within this community, right? I'm coming with a bias, right? I'm going to assume that you have a bias of some kind. It might not be against me, but it might be a bias of some kind. I'm assuming Michael has a bias of some kind. And so when we're bringing these biases, right, and we're going to our jobs, going to our work, right? We work for Ontario Housing, right? And we have a bias against mothers who are single and who have multiple children, maybe with the same dad, maybe not, right? We bring that bias to our work with them, and we're like, this person's not really doing everything they could be doing to get out of this situation. I'm going to put impediments in I'm going to block their level of getting everything they're supposed to get because I think that they're milking the system. And now I bring that bias to my work I do with them, right? And if that mother happens to be Black, and if happens to be Black or happens to be Indo-Asian or happens to be Aboriginal or Indigenous, right? When I'm bringing that to them, right? I am now using my power as a member of the state. I am now being racist because I'm taking my bias, right? And I am impeding this person's development and them getting access to things they need to get to. Because of this bias, I'm operating as a member of the state. I am now using my power against them, right? And so that layer, that interwoven layer, and let me even go further. I'm not a sociologist at all, but I can tell you that even if all of us were the same color, all of us, if we were all like Michael, all like me, there would still be biases. If we were all like me, look like me, there would still be issues of improper use of power. Okay? The problem that we're talking about here is the history, right, of that bias that's been created into a system that we call systematic racism against a particular group of people, right? And so I think that all the things you said are correct. Issues with certain communities that are going unaddressed, economic issues, those things, issues with the media, right? Sensationalizing things and shining a light only on certain things, and then issues with police training, right? All those are true, and then you add in the bias and you add in the systematic racism, right? What you get is a police officer who has good intentions. He gets trained. He gets sent into a community that he has a bias against, and the bias might not even be visible to him. Right?
Yeah,
it's a bias.
I agree.
Right?
And grew up so with. Now,
you're interacting with people from a certain community, and you have a bias against. You don't even recognize as a bias, but because you've been empowered by the state to enforce the state's laws and enforce the state's mandate. Whenever you do anything with your bias, you are being racist by definition. And so we now this is my understanding. So now we look at what's happening in the U.S., right? Specifically, we deal with the police because there's so many layers in the U.S. The history, all the statues being torn down, all the Wall Street, and all the different things. There's so many things that it's hard to focus on one thing. I just try to focus on what's happening with the police, and the only reason why I'm focusing on the police is because the police represent the state.
Yeah.
We can tell the police what to do as the public. If we tell the police we want to be policed a certain way, they have to do it because our tax dollars are funding them. Right? Other things we might not be able to control, right? But the police are funded by us. So if 5% of your community says, hey, this community-funded agency is doing things to this community that we don't like, we need to change that. Why? Well, because their biases are making it difficult for me to live my life, and they're impeding me from getting the things I need to get. And how do you know it's a bias? We don't know for sure, but I'm seeing a lot of videos of people that look like me having these interactions with people in law enforcement. Like I said, even when the color of the officer changes, even when it's not necessarily a white officer, right? But I'm seeing a lot of people that look like me have these interactions with law enforcement. And these interactions are going bad for the people that are not armed. Me as a person who believes that policing is a hard job and believes that police officers should get the best, and I'm in support of them, I would say, hey, we got to do something about this. Because fundamentally, you're here to serve the community. I'm part of the community. I don't like how I'm being served. Let's change this, right? And so that's the best way to piggyback on what you're saying and also add in that component. Not every, I mean, I've been on Facebook as well, conversations with people.
I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Because again, this is something maybe I didn't bring it up, but I had similar discussions where the biases are sometimes subconscious.
Yes.
Because if you are brought into a certain community and that community is always saying certain things, and you are influenced by the people you grew up with, the people you hang out with, and as you grow into an adult, and you may have these preconceived notions and preconceived biases instilled in you, and sometimes you're not even aware,
100%.
right? That these things that you are influenced. This is that you are this way because you are influenced to be this way. But that not at the root of it, that's not necessarily the truth. It's just how you are influenced. And I think that people now need to open their eyes to looking at things in a better way and try to understand things in a better way and try to find solutions to improve these problematic areas. So we demolish some of these biases. And the funny, and there's biases to everything, towards all kinds of things. I think that there's issues with all races and colors and creeds, and there's biases all the way around from all kinds of different things. And again, we need to start looking at this differently and trying to find solutions to look at it differently. And obviously we need to educate the next generation better. Because I think, I mean, do you agree with me in this, what I'm about to say? Even there's a bias, obviously there's a bias within the police department, and there's a bias that gets created there. But is it also a bias created by environments towards police?
Yes.
It might be justifiable. It might be justifiable based on the experience. But if you are grown in a certain environment, you grow up in a certain environment, you're going to be influenced by that environment, then you're going to be educated to feel a certain way about a certain group.
Yeah. May I add something to what you're saying? I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so this is why I say, like, fundamentally, this issue is important, because we have to really hold our state-run institutions accountable. Like the way we want to get rid of crooked politicians, but we want to vote them out, right? We want to keep those people in check because they can affect people's lives negatively. So I'll give you an example of a young man living in a high-priority neighborhood, right? He can be black or white. The likelihood of him interacting with the police is like statistically like 2 or 3 times higher than people who don't live in his neighborhood. Okay, so he walks home from school, the police officer drives by, right? He's at the community center, there's a police car parked at the community center. He goes into the mall, there's a police car in the mall parking lot. Okay, now that's one level. Next level, he's walking home from playing basketball. A police officer pulls him over and says, "Hey, let me talk to you for a minute." Okay, what are you doing here? Are you from this neighborhood? And the kid's thinking, why does that matter? Right? Here, I have a basketball in my hand. I'm obviously playing basketball. What's up with this interaction? Okay? Police officer goes about his questions. Maybe the kid answers, maybe the kid doesn't. He leaves, he goes home. He leaves that interaction now thinking, this police officer stopped me for no reason. Okay? Now, 2 days later, another police officer stops him. What are you doing here? Where are you from? Do you live in this neighborhood? He's thinking, here we go again. Maybe this time he pushes back and says, I don't have to talk to you. I'm going to walk away. And he goes, no, stop. Don't move. What's your name? Blah, 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 blah. He's like, I don't want to tell you the name. No, what's your name? He gives him a fake name. Police officer detains him. Checks it out. The name is fake. You just got charged with obstruct police officer. He's thinking, I was just walking home. This is the second police officer to stop me for walking home. Now I got a charge. Now I got to go through the court process. Right? Now I got to do all that stuff. I get found innocent. I still have to pay for lawyers. My parents still have to find money to pay for the lawyers. We don't have money to pay for lawyers. Because I might have to plead out. I might have to plead guilty, right? Because we don't have money for lawyers. So now I'm on probation. Now I'm on probation. I'm going to probation officer for obstruct police officer for walking home when someone stopped me. Because I didn't want to talk to him. But I couldn't get him off my back. So I gave him a fake name because I didn't know why he's asking me for my name. Right? So now I have, if it's a kid, a youth record, right? I'm carrying on with my life. Yeah. Every police officer I meet from that point on, how do you think I'm going to feel about them?
Oh, absolutely. I'm not disagreeing with you 1,000%.
Yeah, and that's why I want to add, I was just using that to add to that. So the bias is not always out of thin air. Sometimes it's created, not that the officer stopping him asking a question was doing something evil. Police officers are trained to be suspicious. Right? Remember you mentioned police training before? Police officers are trained to be suspicious. And so they inquire when they feel as though it's suspicious. To the regular public, a kid walking home from school with a basketball is not suspicious. To a police officer, it is suspicious. Right? And so here we have the training of the police officer creates a bias against a neighborhood kid in a high priority neighborhood, right? And so moving forward, there's this antagonism between both groups. And so now the interactions do become negative. So now police officers do find that when they try to talk to people from this community, there's a pushback, right? It's because this kid is sharing his story with all his friends. So don't talk to this guy. Don't talk to Biden. Don't talk to police, man. These guys just want to jam you up. That might not even be the case, but the bias is created because of the influence of that one interaction, and that kid tells that to all his friends, right? Or they see that happen, and now you have a community of kids who don't want to interact with the police, even to their benefit.
Yeah. How would you go about, how would you go about, I guess, eliminating that bias in training, I guess, from a fundamental level? If we had our ideal world and we could play God here, how would you start?
I'd like to speak on that. I think I mentioned it earlier. If you had listened, I had mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
Training with police officers is about de-escalation tactics. So learning how to speak with people, with the bottom line, with empathy, and trying to de-escalate situations, not make things worse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't need to be doing the things that they're doing a lot of the times. There's a lot of times they make things worse than what they are.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is communication. They need to learn how to have these social cues and how to speak with people and get them on their side and not make enemies of them, as Professor Jason stated.
Mm-hmm.
So de-escalation and vocal communication, proper training, not just like, no. You need to learn how to speak. You need to learn how to talk. You need to learn how to communicate with empathy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they need, like, if it escalates to things that, okay, they're dealing with an actual criminal,
mm-hmm.
but we're talking about a criminal that is violent with guns, is going to kill you, or someone who just, whatever, like, stole something because they're hungry or whatever, or they're from a poor community and they just made a bad decision.
Mm-hmm.
You can't treat the same person the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. They're treating everybody the same. One paintbrush, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, they need jiu-jitsu. Why? Because if you can control someone safely with good intentions, okay, they're going to get arrested, fine. Here you go. You did something wrong. You're going to pay the price. Fantastic. Deal with the consequences. But, you know, the police officer is safe. The person they apprehend is safe. And they're going to do their due diligence and follow the law.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But the problem with the lack of training, they have no control. So even with just a small scuffle with someone, right, they are now justified to pull the gun and shoot this person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But a lot of the times it doesn't need to go like that far.
Yeah.
You don't need to go that far. If you, man, you know, we all of us here understand how powerful jiu-jitsu is.
Yeah.
As when it comes to controlling people physically.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you don't know jiu-jitsu, I'm gonna toy with you like a cat and mouse.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it doesn't matter how big you are.
Mm-hmm.
I will toy with you because I know how to manipulate and control you and all this other stuff, right? So proper training on how to control people without having to harm them.
Mm-hmm.
And without having to escalate a minor crime into a shooting.
Yeah. I would agree.
Right? So super important that there's been talks, and I don't know if you guys have been following, and we all follow this, where they're talking about, they get 4 hours a year in the US for combatives training. 4 hours a year. And you expect this police officer to go into a dangerous area dealing with a dangerous criminal and, you know, and not to be able to handle it properly.
Mm-hmm.
Or to handle it properly, they're going to resort to tasering and shooting them, because you know why? That's what they have the training in.
Yeah.
They have like monthly training in gun control, you know, weapons control and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have monthly training in body control and tactics,
social tactics.
as how do you, de-escalation tactics, combative tactics. How do you work together with your partner as a unit?
Mm-hmm.
To do it properly and safely.
I would agree with you,
right?
Professor.
And sometimes it's not even. Sometimes it's not even a criminal. It's just some mental case, someone who's not quite right in their head at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But they attack the police. Boom! They shoot them.
Yeah. Well,
no, this person wasn't right in the head. You can't justify it in the sense that, okay, it's physical aggression. So by law, I have the right to defend myself, which means I have the right to use my gun. Mm-hmm. But man, they need constant training and psycho evaluations. Mm-hmm. Because man, Professor Jason said it himself, being a police officer is not an easy job. You see things, you know, all the time that the regular civilian don't get to see, and that shit messes with your head, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you need to see a psychologist, you know, once or twice a year to make sure you're in the right space. And so it starts with these layers, I think.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's where it starts.
May I add to what you're saying?
And you're right, as far as like you, and I agree with you, Jason, as far as like, okay, at this moment in time, based on what happened, our first priority is to fix this issue with the state and how they can control policing.
The shooting at the meeting.
I was going to say, I agree with what you're saying. I think you raised some excellent points about training. And, you know, I am not a policing expert as well. Like, I've spoken to police officers probably like yourself. And it's going to be interesting to see when you have, in the future, if you have a police officer come on, they can maybe speak to some of the tactics and stuff and the things they use to de-escalate.
Just sorry to interrupt, just for a second. And keep in mind that training in Canada versus training in the U.S. is a big difference. There's a big difference. I think that there's movements in Ontario.
Could you repeat that?
Sorry, you want me to? Yeah. Yes, I will. So what I'm saying is, like, I think there's a big difference between training in the U.S. and training in Canada, based on my experience, and I know a lot of gentlemen in the police and the police college and police department, police officers, and there's definitely movement there towards improvement, and it's been happening for years. And there's a lot more jiu-jitsu, I think, in like the police college in Toronto, and using those methods of control, and it's improved greatly, I think, over the years. And I think they're in the right path. So again, there's a big difference between what we're doing here and what we're doing in the U.S. And we all hear about what the Gracie family, those two kids, Head-On and Hit-On. We hear about what they're doing and with the Gracie survival tactics and how much good they've done in police departments. But again, this is just scratching the surface, right?
100%. And could I add this too as well? Like I said, I want to preface by saying Michael's initial question was like, solutions. I'm probably not qualified to offer solutions. I'm like Monday morning quarterbacking. Right? But I can tell you that in my line of work, I've worked with the police in many different settings. And I'll start off by saying every time those settings I worked in, police officers I worked in have been exemplary. Like, they genuinely care about the community. Police officers are bringing issues to community agencies to find support for families there. Because remember, I think one of the underlying problems is that police have become a catch-all for everything that happens in our society that people don't want to deal with. They're the catch-all for the mental health failures, the mental health system failures. They're the catch-all for our senior citizen issue failures, right? And so a lot of police, they're catch-alls for parents not being able to parent, right? They don't have the skills, they don't have the focus, right? And they're the catch-all for, along with the mental health, are drug issues. And so police officers, right, most of their calls are not shootings. Most of their calls are not violent offenders, kicking down doors and robbing people. That's not what most of their calls are, right? A lot of their calls are people calling the police because they don't know who else to call for help. So if your mom is having a mental health episode and she's doing things that you don't understand how to manage, you call the police and the ambulance. The police show up. The police are designed and they're trained to get control of a situation. But as people are coming to find out more, people with mental health issues, it's hard to control them. Right?
Yeah.
So that police officer is walking into a failure of not his police training, right? Because he can get trained, right, ideally, but it's a failure of the mental health system that we have that leaves people to have to be dealt with by the police when there could be other people that person could call for their mom who's having a mental health episode.
Everything you're discussing right now seems to be alluding to the defund the police movement, which is not literally take all the money away from the police, but reallocating resources to the mental health system, and like expanding laterally as opposed to dumping all our resources into one department.
Do you know why the police budget is so big?
Sorry, say it one more time.
I was saying the reason why police budgets have increased, right, the pay and the budgets and different projects and stuff like that is because we want, like, as a society, we're sending the message that we want the police to deal with that stuff, right? But now that it's becoming out of control, now that we're seeing all this video evidence of the police being overwhelmed by these situations, now we're like, defund the police. How about we say this? How about we prioritize where we send our money in the first place? Right? If the police budget is too big,
I just think,
let people deal with that. But how about we increase the budget for other things? Don't take away from this. How about you just find all those extra, like, bloated places that you send money and put that money towards the mental health system, towards.
I think that the message comes across a little bit in the wrong way, because if you really think of it logically, in the sense that, okay, if you take money away from something, it's not going to improve it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So if I take away money from, or if I defund the police, well, that means, you know, there's going to be less money for training, less money for, less incentive to be a police officer as a job.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have lower quality of individuals, and I'm sorry to say it, but you're not going to have the best people for that job. So you're going to create bigger problems, not solutions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you're right. It's relocating. How do you relocate funding? They need to put more money into training these people to be better trained for their job. I also agree. That's a great point that you're saying. I did not think of that, and that's fantastic. Where you're saying, okay, at the upper ends of it all, money needs to be reallocated better. And that's amazing. I think that you bring up a really good point. But I don't think it's the best solution to take funding from the police. I think they need to relocate the funding within the department to training.
Now, mind you,
ultimately, go ahead.
Finish what you're saying, Prof.
No, I think ultimately that's the biggest start here. You know, we're going to have a lot more of these situations occur if the police are better trained.
Yeah.
Because with better training, you're little by little, slowly by slowly getting rid of the stigma. Because then you can't use that as an excuse anymore. It's if they're trained properly and they go in with proper methods on how to handle situations, you're gonna hopefully have less and less and less of these issues, right? So I think that's where the money should go. The money should go so they train. The things, remember, with the police department, that they don't say, what they're not talking about is, like, if you want to train jiu-jitsu, you got to pay out of your own pocket. Like, if you want to train yourself, if you want to go to the gym and make sure you're in shape, you gotta take it. It's out of your own pocket, right? There isn't like, the problem is like, it's there. They have these things in place, I believe. And again, I'm not 100% an expert on this. This is based on what I've acquired as information so far. And okay, there might be maybe even more in Canada than the US, but it's not enough. It's not constant enough. It's too sporadic. And if you want that constant training, that's on you.
Yeah.
As an officer. And most officers don't, you know, they do the job to the best of their ability, but they're not necessarily going out of the way to get more training.
Yeah.
And if it's like part of the department, if it's part of, you know, every police station to have a matted area, and they have to mandatory take attendance, and these people are taking classes all the time, how can this not improve things overall? I think it's a good first step.
I think so too. And let me add to all the great things you're saying here. I know that Michael mentioned about defunding police. I know you brought up the idea, and I think that a lot of times, with a lot of ideas that are brought forward, the wording we use creates backlash, right? Not that you didn't create defund police, right? I know I've heard different ideas around defunding the police. Right? Not all of them I agree with. I think that, like I said, when you look at the police budget, most of police budgets goes to salaries and pensions. Police deserve that. They deserve the money they make. They deserve the pensions they're going to get. So we're not going to touch that, right?
Okay. All right.
Where the community can do a better job with changing the conversation is saying to our politicians, because we elect people to write up these budgets and then give the police what they say they need. We can scrutinize what they say they need, and then we can say, let's allocate, along with the money we're giving them for salaries, for training, let's find non-police options to supporting the public. So right now, police officers don't give out parking tickets. It's too expensive to get a police officer to go out in the street and start handing out parking tickets in different parts. That's a waste of the resource. That's a waste of the money you're paying them, right? We have meter maids. They're a lot less expensive, right? They have the same authority to give the parking ticket that a police officer would, right? In other areas, the government, like our municipal governments, find ways to save money by not using the police for everything. So I think that all those intelligent, smart people that work in policy and government and municipal government and provincial government, they could sit down and find ways to allocate funds that are being used for foolishness, right? They can sit down and find the funds to hire, maybe instead of having 2 mental health workers that follow the police whenever there's a mental health call, maybe hire 12. So now you have 12 people that when the 911 person gets the call to say that someone's in mental distress and they're throwing rocks at someone's window, the police could show up. But if the mental health worker approaches the person first, they have the skill to de-escalate that person. Instead of training your entire police force, which is expensive, if you hire several people to be able to go out and deal with those situations with the police in the background. So if this person is doing crazy things, and I hate to use the word crazy, but they're doing odd things, and you get the call, this person, this mental health support worker comes in on the scene, the police are behind them in their car waiting for the person to signal, this is beyond my control, can you guys go in and step in and deal with it? That person is going to be better at de-escalating, negotiating, recognizing what's happening, because that's their specialty, right? And it's not going to be as expensive as having a police officer, right? It's not going to be expensive as dealing with someone getting tased and maybe getting sued because this person died. Do you know what I mean? So.
Mm-hmm. No, listen, you make a good point, but I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one, on the level of, I'm sorry, every police officer should be trained in these tactics.
Okay.
Right? And every police officer, I'm sorry, there's no, you know what I mean? Every single police officer should understand the escalation, should understand body control, and should understand how to do this job properly. Now, what they can do is recognize that maybe they get on the scene and they recognize, oh, wait a minute, this guy is beyond our scope. We need to bring someone in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's bring the expert in. Like when they have hostages, or the hostages, whatever, they bring an expert in, right?
Yep. Negotiate.
So so this is, I think you're onto the right steps here, but I can't rely on a group, a small group within the department to handle this, because you may not have that time to wait for someone to come, right? So I think every police officer needs to have these trainings, right, where the de-escalation, body control, and proper care of all situations, and only have to resort to more extreme means if their lives are really at stake.
Professor Marco, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And I'm putting this question to you, but I'm also putting it to the OJA and all the other professors that are out there. What could we as a community of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Black Belts and instructors do to support the police better? Should we put a proposal as the OJA towards the police associations and say, listen, we believe in the value of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to help support police officers. You know what? let's negotiate a 3-year project where we get police officers get connected with a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in their area, right? They're given some kind of stipend or some kind of
incentive,
a ticket or something, and they have specialized Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes that cater towards police officers. So the training would not be with the public at large, right? Unless they want to. The training would be with other police officers. The training would be kind of worked out through the OJA, right? And then they'd have access to black belt instructors. They could do it in a situation where people don't have to understand it's a police officer training, so they don't get scrutinized for that, right? And obviously you as a business owner, you'd be reimbursed by the police association or whatever. And then you also allow the police officer to be able to get the training they need to become more confident to control, right? Because if you're saying that hours, right? I think this is something the OJA could do, at least propose it, right? Because we're a large enough organization and there's enough Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructors within the province, right? Most communities will have access to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor. And if police know that you're going to a place where I'm here to help you be better at your job, right? I'm not here to judge you on anything. I'm here to help you be better at your job at a rate that's affordable for you at a time that's better for your work schedule. I think that's a step we could take that will help everybody overall. And as a community, would also allow the police to realize that there's communities that support them. I
agree with you, Jason, and I'm going to go one step further. And I think the better solution would be, yes, I agree that the OJA can maybe do something, right? Or start the movement. But ideally, I think the better solution would be to have the departments themselves have like a matted room, a matted area, and they hire, whether it's they send a police officer out to train and then they become the instructor, because I'm not sure if they can have civilians as instructors, right? But and to have it within each department. If each department had like a jiu-jitsu school within the department and hire professionals, people that know what they're doing, what they're talking about, and what they're teaching, I think that would be like the perfect scenario. Not only would it create opportunities for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructors, because of the opportunities to be hired and to get paid, but it also would facilitate for the police officers to train, because they can just go to where they work, right? They don't need to go after a particular jiu-jitsu school. They can just go to their department that they work at, and they can schedule their time to, when they're off duty, to go in and train. I think this would be like the perfect scenario, I think. And our job as leaders of the community would be to maybe provide instructors for these, these academies, but make sure that these are qualified instructors, where there's a lot of sport out there, and it's what's being pushed, but there isn't a whole lot of that combative jiu-jitsu being taught. So we need people that are educated in that aspect of jiu-jitsu to be placed in those positions. And I love the sport. Don't get me wrong, the sport's amazing. I think sport is important. It keeps people in shape. It would keep the officers, with more physical activity. The rolling is super important to understand body manipulation and control. So it's a combination of both. Jiu-jitsu is all encompassing. You need the combatives to understand combative scenarios, and then you need jiu-jitsu as a sport to understand the pressure and the control and that competitive environment, and it will keep you in shape. So you're in better shape as an officer in order to be able to handle the altercations where you're going to have to grab someone and you're not going to run out of gas in 30 seconds. So again, this is all idealism, or this is ideal. But
listen, Professor, listen, you guys built a community from the mud. This could be done. You agree, Michael? Like, this could be done. Like, we got
I'm just,
people.
I'm not sure I'm the right one to spearhead this, though.
Well, listen,
You know,
we can find a spearhead, but like, if it takes me to spearhead it, I'm willing to do it. But what I'm asking is, as a community of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, instructors, school owners, I think that as you see in the U.S. right now, we see people, and people do this. People are doing stuff like they're saying we stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. You know, they're doing these really positive things, saying they're showing support for the movement that's happening now and for the change it's asking for. And I think that we can do that as well, right? But if we're talking about policing and we see the value of what we offer, right, what jiu-jitsu can bring to the community, policing and community as a whole, right? I think that it's incumbent upon us as members of the OJA and people involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in this community. It should be us who takes the lead and says, hey, police force, hey, community, we have this skill we can offer you, right? Let's all work together to provide this skill that's going to benefit you as a police officer overall. It might not have to be Professor Marco. Like your hands are full, right? But I'm sure there's a number of black belts.
I would love to be involved.
Yes.
I'm not sure I'm educated enough in the processes that would be, you know, necessary to make these things happen. You know, I'm much better as a support unit than I am in spearheading something like this.
Me too. But listen, I'm talking. Anyone who's listening, and you are involved in law enforcement, maybe you're a police officer, maybe you're a staff sergeant, and you love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you see the value in it. Listen, contact Professor Marco, contact myself, contact any local Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school, black belt, and let's put our heads together to get you guys what you need, because there's people who are willing, right? Like, we're talking about solutions. Here's a solution, right? It's being offered to you by people who are professional, people who understand your job. It's hard. People that want to see better things, people that recognize there is a problem, and we want to help in providing a solution, right? I think that you've put enough time into this sport, into the martial art itself, to be able to, you know, instructors.
Well, the thing is, I think there's also like a lot of people in the community understand me as a successful coach and being a, you know, very successful with my team within the sport context. But I was brought up in jiu-jitsu within the self-defense. I know all of the self-defense, Gracie combatives. I know all of that. I had to learn that. It was part of our curriculum. It was part of our getting our belts. We had to know that. Remember, and I've said this before in my other shows, when I got into jiu-jitsu, it was MMA, self-defense, and then sport. Sport was last on the list. It was at the bottom of the list. And this has turned upside down in the last 10 years or so, where, okay, sport, gi no gi is what everybody's into. A few academies still do self-defense, but it is a trickle of individuals going to MMA, you know? So it got upside down. So the issue I'm getting at, what I'm getting at here is that there would have to be some kind of curriculum established that would be geared towards, you know, situations that the police officers deal with, right? And how do we use jiu-jitsu methods and techniques and strategies to implement into those scenarios, right? So a lot of it, of course, is obviously understanding body control, clinch, safe takedowns, you know, control, all the way into handcuffing methods. And how did you do that by yourself, or how do you do that with your partner? Right? So there needs to be a curriculum established first. We can't just have every black belt out there go, oh yeah, I can do that, and then they go in and they're teaching reverse de la hiva, rolling bidding bolo. How is that tactically sound for, you know, dealing with you know, a violent situation on the street?
It looked cool. I'd say that much. No, no, but
yeah, we've lost Professor Mcdonald. Let's just, you know,
can you
see what
hear me?
No, we can hear you, but I can't see you.
We can hear you, but we don't see you.
For some reason, my camera's all messed up. But I'm getting some calls. Some people are trying to get my attention here.
Fair enough.
Would I be able to step off this this live? It's just such a great conversation. Could you guys have me come back again? I'd love to talk about this again if you guys have time for me.
It's time that you're saying that because we're at the 2 hour mark right now. So
we're hitting the 2 hour mark now, Jason. So we'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great to speak with you. You're an amazing individual. I am proud to know you. And maybe we can schedule like this again.
Yeah.
And maybe bring in some more thought processing to it. It was amazing. Thank you so much. I am very grateful, my friend.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Professor. I look forward to seeing you guys in person once we get through this whole COVID thing. But yeah, anytime. It's my pleasure. Anytime you guys need me for anything, let me know.
Cheers, man.
Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Likewise, my friend. Likewise. You take care now.
God bless.
Whoa, I was that too. There we go.
So that was amazing. Thank you so much to Professor Jason Mcdonald for coming on here. That was a very good conversation. And ultimately, that's what I was looking for, is to, I think these are the types of conversations that need to be had, intelligent conversations with people and individuals, and to try and find solutions and to better our society and to better how we do things as a community. And I love jiu-jitsu. I think it's one of the most empowering things that we do, and that we can use jiu-jitsu hopefully to contribute to what we want to see in society, and not just the day-to-day training in the academies. He brought up a lot of good points. He brought up a lot of good things, and I would love to, as we leave off the conversation, I would love to see this ideal of jiu-jitsu being implemented more and more and more in the police force.
Actually embedded in the system. I agree. I think the steps are there. There just needs to be a few things like a curriculum, someone to actually go through with it, and someone to negotiate the conversation with the government. But those aren't easy steps. Everything there is actually fairly difficult.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone that came on here. I hope you appreciated the conversation. I hope you enjoyed all the areas that we went into. I didn't get a chance to speak about this, but what my lovely wife was trying to get my attention on. She was here for a few seconds. She was trying to get my attention, and that's that there has been a department set up within the police that deal with mental issues.
Oh.
Ever since the shooting of that kid on the bus, and that's what she was trying to tell me, that there is a department within the police that strictly deals with handling mental situations or mental issue situations. So there is that already in place, but I guess it's so new, and that I guess it's not in the consciousness of most people yet, but it is there. It is set up. So I'll leave you all with that. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.